Thank you guys for joining us for this last in our series on what is the role of a downtown parish. We are especially excited for tonight's guest, Bishop Glenda Curry. Bishop G, as you all know, or most of you know anyway, was sent from St. John's to seminary. As she said at the installation a few weeks ago, she preached her first sermon, I think it's 24 years ago, from the pulpit of St. John's. And we are thrilled that she has come full circle from beginning her career as a nurse to her position as president of Troy State in Montgomery, to being a priest, a rector, and now our diocesan bishop. One of the reasons we have her here is not only her experience with St. John's and leading a downtown institution organization in Troy, but also she sees our sister parishes throughout the diocese in ways in which we don't. There are other downtown parishes in substantive cities in Alabama, and she can share with her what she observes from that in her parish at All Saints and Homewood, to the extent that it was downtown. There's a downtown in Homewood. She was in downtown Homewood, so that was an urban suburban setting. She was in the heart of the city, so perhaps she can reflect on that as well. So Bishop G, we're glad that you are here. And I would just ask you to begin with kind of reflecting on an overview of what you see as the role, and in the big picture, the role of downtown parishes and their ministry to the larger community.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for having me. And I'm always happy to be near to St. John's or anything that they're doing. And I realize sitting here that I'm right over my head is a picture of St. John's, and that was not staged. That is actually in my study in Birmingham, which is where I'm coming to you this morning from. My experience of downtown ministry in bigger churches in Alabama is that they tend to be the place where the secular and the religious worlds collide. It is more likely that you'll have people who really are homeless or looking for help walk into downtown parishes. They tend to be places where there's sort of resources to the downtown anchor sort of city life. I know Advent is that in Birmingham. Believe it or not, All Saints, but All Saints was in the City of God in Homewood, where we have, a Catholic church, a Methodist church, a Presbyterian church, and an Episcopal church, and a Baptist church, all on four corners. And so it was kind of one of many, but it tends to be a place where unchurched people find a church access. It also offers during seasonal times, like, the season of Lent or Christmas, it becomes sort of that place where people go to church once a year, very often, because they can access it easily and they don't feel confined because it's not a destination parish in the same way that you drive for miles to get there. So I think they're in a position to lead whatever efforts to be open to different populations. You can lead from the position of being a downtown church. So that would be one thing that I think is truly possible for St. John's, but also for any other downtown parish. So I'm gonna have to stop and grab my dog who's got a squeaky bone.
Okay.
These are the things we do when
That's
we
right.
record from
That's
home. So it's exciting to lead a downtown parish because you have all those possibilities. The other place I think that I see them leading is in the encouragement of cultural events and artistic exchange. It tends to be a place where you do attract different denominations, but also different faiths. So it can be truly ecumenical, and you can share artistic and cultural offerings like concerts, and really showcase your own talent, but also attract other talent. So it's the place where people learn that church is more than whatever more than means in that context. So it's a real opportunity. A place like St. John's is sort of a major anchor for Montgomery. And when the downtown part of Montgomery was not so built up as it is today, St. John's was one of the places where people went in order to decide what is downtown, because it was there before anything else.
Yeah.
St. John's and City Hall were the big things that were down there. So if you choose to connect to the chamber and the other, I guess it would be the Committee of 100 or whatever other groups in Montgomery, then you have access because you're from St. John's. So.
What did you, when you were at Troy, what did you see because you helped in many ways cast a vision for the revitalization of downtown. Mm-hmm. What did you see in that? What inspired you to be a part of that?
The location and the neglect. Those were the two things. Around us were 13 or 14 parcels of land that had abandoned buildings and old, kind of like what you've got next to you by City Hall, businesses that had closed, and they just left. They walked away and just waited. And so there was a lot of possibility because the land was really sitting there, and it wasn't that expensive, honestly. The site where the Rosa Parks Museum is located was an old theater, and it had about 300 gallons of water in the basement. and we bought it for about $160,000, if you can believe that.
Wow.
On the corner. And then one thing that happens when you're in a downtown environment is you can look around for partnerships. So we looked around and we formed a partnership with the city of Montgomery because they wanted those buildings taken or bought because they wanted it cleaned up, and they eventually gave us the boulevard where we closed it and made the plaza. They actually deeded that to the university because we made a partnership deal that we would clean it up if they would help us keep that space whole by not driving cars down the middle of it. And so Emery Fulmer agreed to that. But the other thing that sort of came together with the Parks Museum and the downtown revitalization was an original plan for that part of that boulevard, which comes from the Frank Johnson Courthouse facing the river, was actually one of the early designs of the downtown area. And then another design was placed over it, which ran sort of perpendicular to that. And we were kind of just, by the grace of God, in the middle of it. And so when I looked around and I saw the Parks Museum idea could fit right there on the spot where she was arrested, but also be right next to the Frank Johnson Courthouse. It just was, and then right up the street, I guess, was up the hill, used to be the bus station. So all of that was right there within 2 blocks of us. And so partnerships with RSA, because RSA was another big player downtown, partnerships with the chamber, being active and involved in those organizations, and then asked to sort of help, brainstorm about how we could revitalize it, and how we could get people to come downtown. We also had the theater, the Davis Theater across the street, and that was another cultural place where you could actually have plays and concerts and things like that. And since then, of course, Dr. Bronner has come in and built a bigger place to do that in the Civic Center. But that was the original. It really started with a need to get it cleaned up. And if you're willing, even if you're a church and you go out there, my experience is you'll find partners, but we sometimes think, oh, we're religious and therefore we can't partner with civic organizations, which is not true.
Right.
I think it's becoming actually more true over time that people pay less attention to the fact that you're a religious organization and more attention to your ambition and your energy.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think one of the things, and we have Jesus to thank for it, as we do for most things, but even when I think it's the blind man that comes to Jesus and he's clearly blind, and Jesus asks him, what do you need?
Yeah.
Why are you here? What do you want? And so even Jesus asked, in seeing the most obvious illness, or the most obvious way in which one person can be marginalized or dismissed or ignored, Jesus still asks them what they need. And I think that the churches can model that, especially downtown churches, in asking the community around them, what do you need? That's a fair question for us to ask. We have a model for that.
Yeah.
And I think it has also not only a good civic purpose, but it's also a good evangelical purpose as well.
I think that's a good way to think about it. I also think one of the things that a church can do that we probably know more now because of COVID, we can be flexible. We didn't always think we could, but one of the attributes that makes a downtown project work, or a church partnership with the civic group, is if the church can be flexible. A lot of the times people don't want to have partnerships with churches because they think, well, they have an agenda and they're not gonna really adapt to us. In other words, having different religious groups, maybe offering a form of enterprise in a coffee shop, or
Right.
something that invites the public in to the church, and being willing to do that and open to it, rather than just, confined to your mission on Sunday.
Sure.
Because that's really just a part of it. I know I mentioned St. Martin's in the Fields on Saturday last week, and one of the things they did was have 15-minute concerts where they open the front doors and they have their organist play for 15 minutes, and people came in who were going to lunch and sat down for 15 minutes and got a chance to see the inside of the church and said a prayer at lunch and went back out. And so the church was being flexible, and it, really didn't say you have to be a Christian. It also did not ask them to stay a long time, or
Right.
to reveal their identity or their blood type or anything else. Just open for 15 minutes, and they called them 15-minute concerts. And that was just an example of, I think they did that really well, and it opened the door to people to come back.
Well, I appreciate you referencing that book. I've ordered it. I think it will be here today. And it may be the vestry's reading assignment for the
That'll be great. There's another one that he did that'll even, that sort of is practical, called Liturgy on the Edge. And
Okay.
it's about specific liturgical adaptations that he's making to the downtown experience, and being open to Jewish, Muslim, completely undefined spiritual people, whatever, has been part of what they've done, and not really worrying about it too much, not being confused about what they're doing. They're just showing them the church and the experience of what Christians can do. which is sometimes pretty mysterious if you think about it.
Right, right.
So,
Well, one of the things that Robert gifted me when I opened one of the desk drawers was the bound trial transcript of Mr. Wilkinson, Father Wilkinson, who was tried by Bishop Beckwith
oh gosh, I remember.
for inviting the rabbi to come speak. And Mr. Wilkinson's very savvy man, and he found an end around to avoid. As a bishop, you might not agree with this. Probably as a parish priest, you love the story, but maybe as a bishop, you don't. But Mr. Wilkinson found an end around of the bishop's directive, and ended up being acquitted in the trial, much to Bishop Beckwith's dismay. But the whole point was that he leveraged the position of St. John's as a downtown parish and as inviting voices from the community into the parish to speak to the entire community. And
Yep.
Bishop Beckwith did not care for that vision, but St. John's embraced it.
Yeah.
And the vestry at that time fully supported Mr. Wilkinson in doing that. So
Yeah, I read that in Bishops, Bourbons, and Big Mules, that book.
That's right.
By Barry Bond. What a great book.
I have it. It's on my desk right over there. So,
yeah.
So you see a variety of downtown churches, urban settings. What are the universal challenges that you see in those, and what are different places doing to mitigate those challenges?
I think the universal challenges are things that are not very sexy, like parking. Parking, there again, I think, sometimes on Sunday, there's a different way to park than there is on Monday. Exploring that and finding the people around you a little more receptive. In Homewood, we had 40 parking places for an average Sunday attendance of 450. And they parked all over the place. And we periodically had to have, like a big celebration of the neighborhood or whatever in order to give them hot dogs and things that would help them get over the fact that we blocked them in. So I think parking's one of them. I think also just security. I don't want to say that too loudly because it shouldn't stop us from being open. But I think more and more having someone available to help you, especially if you're having things at night, lighting, things like that, which a downtown environment can be, challenging at night. So getting people to feel safe enough to access it and having security. I think there's also one of the ministries that comes to mind easily are the feeding ministries, because of the location and the visibility that a lot of people that just pass through who would want to stop and need assistance would stop for food. And I don't know. I know St. John's used to have quite a flow of people that would just stop by, and so working with that is an ongoing, what's the safest way, the best way. So that would involve, I think, having partnerships with other social agencies in the area so you could help people get where they needed to be, because you got the highest steeple. So they can see you from far away and they know they're going to get some help there. And then I think the final one would be just providing education and support for the population that calls it home, so that identity continues to be strong, and that they see themselves as people who want to reach out, and don't become sort of walled off. Right. Because I think that's a challenge. I know at the Advent, there's kind of this sense that there's this need for bigger and bigger boundaries to keep the distance from everybody. And they're not too far from Lane Park, which has a large homeless population. And so they have to really check themselves and have food and things like that available, but also to remember that that's part of what Jesus calls us to, is to be receptive and permeable to the population outside, not to just be inwardly focused, which is what you're going to read in that book, is an outward focus, which is not always that easy to maintain if you feel threatened.
Right.
So,
well, you know St. John's pretty well.
mm-hmm.
So what are the, because we want to affirm and love on people in order to help move them into new places. What are the greatest traits, characteristics about the folks at St. John's that you think sets us up for kind of a new focus and a new direction? I mean, obviously I'm new, there's a transition after 25 years of leadership. We're in a different world. We're going to come out of the pandemic and we're going to have to reorient what our focus is, because we clearly know that it can't simply be all about this location and this place. We now have a congregation that worships really all over Alabama by viewing us online.
Right.
So what do you see in the traits and characteristics, the graces of St. John's that helps us prepare for that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is generosity. I think St. John's has historically been incredibly generous, not only to the diocese, but to the community. They support all kinds of outreach, and they plan ahead. They're not folks that don't think about the future or make plans to be here in a few years. So I would say that comes to mind immediately. Then I think, St. John's has a history of being traditional, but they also sent me to seminary, and I was the first woman that had ever been in their pulpit or that celebrated the Eucharist. And what was strange about that is there really wasn't any debate about it. No one got up and said, well, this is a stupid idea and we shouldn't do it. It was just sort of accepted. So I think even though St. John's and the women of the church asked me, did you think when you came here we were just a bunch of stuck-up rich snobs? And I said, no, I didn't. So I think that they are open to change. They're open. They know the future's not going to be exactly like the past. And so they're open. So they're a lot more open than people think they are. And they're a lot more, they are welcome change. And I think you're probably seeing some of that already. And even though they had leadership that was a certain kind of leadership, the lay leadership was never diminished. So I think they have strong lay leaders and well-educated folks that value the church and value their community. But they also know they need to grow in order to remain viable. So I think you're going to find, I would expect that they would embrace any leader that laid a vision before them and explained how that was connected to Jesus, that they'd be game for that, and would want to do it. That's my experience of them all these years, and they haven't really changed a whole lot. They've had several associates, and they really have maintained pretty much the same visibility in leadership. And I think if you go back and read the history books, Rosa Parks went to church at St. John's and was in the balcony when she attended Virginia Durr's daughter's wedding there. And so they have a rich history, a lot of stories to tell. And I think for the most part, they are going to be not as hard as people might think to challenge and invite into the future. So I'm excited about your future there, John. I think you're off to a great start, and I think you have the right attitude to follow Robert Wisniewski. And I think you should blame him for everything that's not going well. And and if he watches this, he will not be surprised that I said that. But I think the future is really bright, and the generous people and the faithful, committed Christians that are there. But I was brand new to Montgomery. I was brand new to St. John's. No one ever asked me anything except, when I walked in and wanted to start working and helping, they acted like I'd been there for 50 years. So that was my experience of them.
You have a guard dog. So thank you for sharing that part. And as you know from the history, I think you are the 7th bishop who has a connection to St. John's. I think that's right. If I'm not right, Sally will correct me. Sally Millsap will correct me. But I think you are the 7th bishop somehow birthed or connected to St. John's. So you stand in a long line of wonderful people, including the first bishop of Alabama. So we will claim you.
Well, that's great. That's a perfect number.
That's right. Exactly.
And I'm number 12.
That's right. The other thing that I just want to say before we finish is you have been incredibly supportive. We are working with casting a vision for how we can be a part of the civic life, the cultural life. Much of downtown, its success in the last few years has been really based upon the tourism industry, and specifically that of people coming to experience and understand the civil rights movement as it played out here in Montgomery. And I think for many people, that story is the idea of civil rights is there's a universality to it. And because at some point in time throughout our history, and we certainly see this in Jesus's ministry, that the powerful have oppressed the less powerful in whatever way, shape, or form. And when we look at the mission of the church and the catechism, it says that we are to reconcile the world with God and with one another. And so you and I have had conversations, and we've begun to have conversations here about how we do that work of reconciliation and how we are a part of those people who are seeking to learn more of the story, not only of Montgomery, not only of the civil rights movement, but I think ultimately of themselves and of their faith and what their responsibilities are as baptized people. We have a church that's already called us and said, "Can you set up a pilgrimage for us?" There's no clearinghouse, there's no universal pilgrimage, or that anybody said. So one of the first things we're going to try to do is to say, yes, call us, and here's your pilgrimage package, and here's how we can be a part of that. Here are perhaps some reflections, some ways of doing this. Here's some information that we can provide and partner with other groups. And watch that expand, ideally, to watch that vision expand into being a resource for people to really kind of do the hard work of reconciliation. Mm-hmm. And that's a journey. We know that's a journey in the process. But I just want to thank you for your support in that. And those conversations are ongoing. But you having the experience at Troy, you being bishop, you knowing St. John's is all. I feel like I've kind of walked into to a gold mine. Despite Robert's best efforts, I've walked into a gold mine in terms of the potential for that.
I think you have, and I see the pieces can come together, and it's an ideal time, and I'm looking forward to our working together and our conversations about it. There's just so much that needs to be done to help us synthesize what is possible with pilgrimage in Alabama, but especially in Montgomery. We very often at the Parks Museum had to send people down to the Civil Rights Monument. They didn't even know it existed.
Right.
And that the lack of clearinghouse is a good word. There's no clearinghouse. And I think Good Shepherd has worked a little bit to help do that. You're doing it. You know, I just think it's neat how the Holy Spirit is sort of bringing the pieces together, and we're really going to get a job. The Holy Spirit's going to give us a job, and then
That's
we're
right.
going to do that. We're going to do that, and then whatever gets built, I'll be over and against that. That's pretty much how the Parks Museum came together. It was very much like that. It was just organic, as they say.
Organic, the Holy Spirit, they're both good.
Yep, they are.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate this. And we look forward to a continued conversation, and continued partnership, and any wisdom and advice that you can give. That is great. Any rules or regulations, feel free to keep to yourself, but all the advice and all the wisdom we'll take.
Well, thank you, John, and blessings to all the people at St. John's. And I look forward to more.
Great. Thank you, Glenda. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.